And how is it possible that two people can be together and there is an element of it that is good, and at times Allah may have a different vision? What was the purpose of marriage? What's the view of marriage, for example, in other relationships, in other countries, in other religions? And what can we think about this and learn about this? Is it just Islam that has this view? Or maybe even other religions have a common similar view? And finally, how did the Ashab of Imam Hussein teach us what it means to have a beautiful relationship? This is our agenda for tonight. Wherever you are, here in Australia or across the globe, wherever you hear my voice, Sana salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the first level, when it comes to this, in the terms of the future of our community, one of the things that we need to start discussing is how do we have harmonious relationships in terms of the light of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. The first element that I want to discuss here is with respect to what is a relationship supposed to be like in the Islamic sense. And when we get to that, before that you'll even find that the institution of marriage is something that is sacred amongst world religions. If you come to Judaism, you'll find it's sacred. When you come to Christianity, you'll find it's sacred. When you come to Islam, of course it's something that is sacred. Similarly, when it comes to the sacred meaning, it is something that has a spiritual and religious significance. In fact, even Hinduism and other religions, you'll find that this is sacred. I mean, you know, in Hinduism, marriage is a 7 generation thing, 7 lifetimes. Some of the brothers are saying, Alhamdulillah, I'm not that religion. Some are saying, I wish I was. I don't know. The principle is every major religion has said this is a relationship that should be sanctified in its own way. When it came to Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the terms of what the relationship is supposed to be like, Allah explained that the verse that I recited at the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Hunna libasun lakum wa antum libasun lahunna. Allah used an analogy, a term, that you are a covering, a term, libas, meaning a covering for them and they are a covering for you, the husband and the wife. Now in this, covering, according to the ulama, has different elements of what it means. One aspect of covering is to cover, for example, clothing. If you take clothing and you look at this, you'll find there are elements of the equation that, for example, it covers any uyub or any aib or any issue that is related to something that's less than perfect, for example, what we would call. There's another aspect of beautification. Shaykh Mutahari talks about this, that the white color, for example, to wear is recommended in Islam. And in that, the idea is, one of the elements is it simplifies cleanliness, purity, and also it beautifies the person who wears it. Similarly, a cloth or libas or covering can beautify the other. And so that's also an element of it. So when you and I get married, we're not just getting married to exist. We're also doing this in order for us to help the other person grow and ourselves. We have a common interest, which is a spiritual journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Am I helping my spouse on that journey? Are they helping me on that journey? And this is where it's a reminder and it's something to consider not only for those who want to get married, but also those who are married, to reflect and refresh what is the goal of this. You see, the complexity of the world that we're facing and why this conversation is so important, and particularly in this time, in this era, even in Muharram, is because if you look at the data and you look at the environment around, I don't know if you deal with this as much as I have to deal with this, but people say divorce is rising. And if you look at the statistics, divorce is not rising. In fact, you'll find marriage is declining in some. People are saying, I don't need to get married anymore. Why do I get married? I'll just live with someone for, as long as we're working, we'll live together. As long as it's working, it's working. If it's not, I'll just go another way. But what we are not considering as a society is what happens to the children as a result of this. And what happens to the next generations as a result of this. And this can lead to problems. Who are the role models for our children and our next generation? I'll invite you to read a book. It's called American Girls. It's written by an author who's looking at the society of America and young women. And she says one particular scenario in her book that I want you to please pay attention to. If I can please have the attention of the brothers and the sisters, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So when it comes to this issue, and this may change someone's life for the better. So she said, I was sitting in a mall in Florida, happened to be. And she said, when I was sitting in this mall in Florida, she said, I was doing research to write this book. Nancy Jo Sales, that's the name of the author. She said, I was doing research to write the book. And in this, there were some girls, I had asked these parents, mother and daughters, can I interview you and can we have a conversation? And she said, sure. So she said she's sitting with the daughters and they're sitting in the mall. You know how you go to the mall, Westfield or whatever, pick your mall, and you're sitting there. And so they're sitting there and they're waiting for the moms who had gone to the stores, and the moms were coming back. And she said, she looked at the mothers, Nancy Jo Sales, and she looked at the daughters, and she noticed something. She said the mothers were dressed in a particular way. And the daughters were dressed in a particular way. And what she began to say is, isn't this interesting? That the mothers were dressed like the daughters. The daughters were not dressed like the mothers. What's the difference? She said, don't you think it's interesting, she said to the girls, that your moms or the mothers these days are dressed like you and not the other way around? Meaning someone who's 40, 45 years old, for example, at 30, 35, 30, 40, whatever the age is dressing like someone who's 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Not the other way around. In the 60s in America, in the 50s in America, before that, in a place like America, the mothers used to dress in a particular way and the daughters would follow. And she said this to the daughters, and the daughters said, you know what? Yeah, they said, of course. Because everyone wants to look attractive today. Everyone wants to look, not my words, their words, hot today. And so the dynamics is, if the mothers are trying to look like the daughters, then who's the role model for the mother? As in, is the mother teaching the daughter? Who's the role model for the daughter? Or is the daughter teaching the mother? I mean, think about this in terms of our society. So this is a challenge that is emerging in our broader society, number one. Number two, when it comes to marriage and it comes to this, remember, Rasulullah said he came for what? إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمُ الْأَخْلَاقِ. And I mentioned to you, there's makarim al-akhlaq and mahasin al-akhlaq. Each lecture should continue, and hopefully you're making the connections. So now when it comes to the relationship, Allah says there's a libas. So we're supposed to have this element that we're on the same page. Another thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, He made this relationship so that there is لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. That is, there is taskeen, there is this sense of tranquility between husband and wife. But whenever I mention this anywhere, some brother or sister comes to me and says, Sayyid, you know, you said the ayah of the Quran that it's supposed to be tranquility, but I don't feel it. There's no tranquility here. It's just rift, rift, rift. So hopefully we can solve this problem or be on track to solve this problem tonight. It's a global phenomenon that we're dealing with. What does this say? Now, the Quran uses two terms when it comes to spouses. If you read Surah Hujarat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the wives of the Prophet who made life difficult for him. The wives of the Prophet who, for example, they used to start, there's different narrations about it, but the story or the event of Maghafir, that Rasulullah would go to one of his wives and she would give him a drink and he would drink that drink, and sometimes the other wives would taunt, perhaps out of envy or jealousy, and Rasulullah didn't respond. Quran responded on behalf of Rasulullah and said, why do you make that which is allowed haram on yourself? Because Rasulullah said, I'm not going to drink this anymore. Now, at the end of that, Allah balanced this equation and showed very clearly that there are two terms. One is imra'at and the other is zawj. Zawj is when used, when there is a harmony in terms of the iman of the husband and wife. But Allah, for example, Rasulullah and Bibi Khadija, for example, Fatima and Amir al-Mu'mineen, for example, all those were on the same page. But Allah used another term when the husband and wife were not on the same page. Allah used the term imra'at for Nuh and Lut. Allah said Nuh and Lut's spouses, they were not on the same spiritual page. And so Allah used this term. Now, by the way, Allah is not, the balance of the Quran is beautiful. You know, we talk about feminism, masculinism, and all of these isms of the world. But Allah didn't say that just because you're a man is superior. No way. Allah said Maryam is afdal to many men. Alayhi salam. And at the same time, Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun, was much greater spiritually than her husband, Fir'aun. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the husband is superior or the wife is superior. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it clear that it depends. And there are times where Allah condemned both husband and wife. For example, Abu Lahab. تَبَّتْ يَدَا أَبِي لَهْبٍ وَتَبْ. Right? So he mentioned that as well as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the wife. They were both adamantly against Rasulullah. So that was also wrong. So what is important in a relationship is that there should be this sense of both being on the same page, that they have this relationship for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remember, marriage in Islam is something that is spiritual and part of deen. It's something that is ibadah in itself. Meaning what? What, have you not heard the relationships that the salah of a married man is greater in terms of reward than the one who's not? So idea of the relationship is a spiritual endeavor. So the same way you recite salah and you think that this is of course something that we're supposed to do, and it's an element that increases my spirituality, similarly marriage is supposed to do that. You know, the ancient philosophers even had views on this. Socrates said that by all means marry. If you find the right person, you'll be happy. And if you don't, you'll become a philosopher. And so the idea is, and the sisters are probably saying there's many philosophers on the sister side. They'll say you should ask us also, and vice versa. Now, one thing that I want to mention is, one of the elements of the equation is you have to have compassion. You know, two things can be true at once. I can be for the rights of our sisters, and we definitely need to make sure that their rights are taken care of, because they're the mothers of our future generation, and they're our daughters, our sisters, our spouses. And there are many challenges that they face in today's society. For example, wearing the physical hijab in society. You know, us as brothers, we get by easy. Sometimes people will think, you know, somebody will say maybe you're Italian or Russian or, you know, wherever. You blend in. In America, a lot of people in Florida and Texas, they think you're Hispanic, for example. They'll think you are like this. But our sisters, they don't have that luxury in their option. When you're wearing the hijab, it's very clear. University of Hawaii did a study in America to look at what is the clearest indication of someone's faith today. And they said number one on the list was the turban that the Sikh community wears. You know, our friends there. Remember one thing. I often say this in America, I'll mention here. We are not at odds with Sikhism or Hinduism or Judaism and Christianity. We are not at odds with them. We are all collectively at odds with jahl, with ignorance. That's our common enemy, because in America, when there's a shooting that has happened in a state like Wisconsin, the person comes and opens fire on a Sikh Gurdwara thinking they are Muslim. That's what the shooter, this happened in America, as you know. Their ignorance, unfortunately, is that high. So when they get killed, because they're thinking that they are Muslim, you know, it's not far, God forbid, someone sees one of our ulama and God forbid, does something. So we need to eradicate ignorance all by in itself. And we are on the same path with people of faith in this regard of humanity. So we are not at odds with these people. We are at odds with jahl wherever it is. Number one. The second, according to the University of Hawaii, the second clearest indication of someone's... number two was the Sikh turban. Number one, I'm going in the reverse order, number one on the list was the hijab that Muslim sisters wear. It was clear as day. As soon as someone was wearing the hijab, it's 100% clear what's their faith and what's their religion, what they believe. Now, in some places, maybe it's easier to wear the hijab, but others, it's not always that easy. For example, our sisters. And so we have to make sure that we are compassionate about that, number one. Number two, but also that doesn't mean for our brothers it's always easy. Two things can be true at once. On one side, we need to make sure that the rights of our sisters are fully adhered to and they need support, but also sometimes the brothers need support, believe me, honestly. And sometimes we don't talk about what's happening with the brothers. If I talk about what's happening with the brothers, that does not mean that I'm saying that the sisters have everything perfect. Please understand what I'm saying. But I'll tell you an example. I was in Florida and I met a doctor who was not a Muslim, Christian, Hispanic, elder doctor who was she's older, she's about to retire. And she tells me, you know, you have a problem in your community and you're not addressing it. I said, what? She said, you know, when I was in med school, I was a little older and some of the younger guys, so she was like maybe 4th year and 1 year, 2nd year, there's a lot of people from South Asia in the med school. India, Pakistan and the likes, in this area. A lot of them. And she said, you know what your problem is? I said, what? He said, your men are suffering and no one's talking about it. I said, what? He said, they used to come to me and they used to tell me how much pressure was on them. This is in America. How much pressure is on a young, for example, Muslim male or young Asian male. They have to make so many people happy. They have to make their parents happy. They have to make their kids happy. They have to make their spouse happy. They have to make society happy. But nobody stops and asks them, are you happy? Is everything okay in your life? And she said, her words, not mine, any other person in American society, any other man would crack and fall under the pressure of what they have to face. So when men are suffering, that's not good for the women or for the children or the family at all. The same is true for our sisters. When they are suffering, we don't flourish and we don't thrive. So what are some solutions that we can look for in light of what the Ahlul Bayt have taught? Look, Bibi Khadija and Rasulullah were on the same page to the point that Rasulullah used the wealth of Lady Khadija salamullahi alayha in order to help the world. To the point that he didn't even have a kafan to bury her until Allah sent it. Further than this, the narrations say Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima al-Zahra, for the length of their marriage, forget any disagreement. It is as if they used to finish each other's thoughts and concepts. That is why the tranquility led to the rise of these children such as Imam al-Hussein, Imam Hassan, Zainab and the likes. And the spiritual compatibility between them was at the highest level. Because Rasulullah said that had Ali not been there, there would be no kufu for Fatima. There would be no one to marry Fatima. Now, let me stop here for a second. Kufu, this compatibility issue that we often talk about, in our modern world, kufu has become, what's your bank balance? What's my bank balance? What's your family's bank balance? What's my family's bank balance? That's not Islam's vision of what is kufu. You know, I deal with this in America. I don't know how it is here. In America, many people, you'll ask them, you'll talk to them, you know, say, find someone, you know, for my daughter or something like that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, what are you looking for? They'll say, you know, we want someone who is a doctor. Education, good Islam, the doctor. They should be good looking. They should be fair skinned. These are two different ones, huh? There's apparently, I don't know where this racism comes in, okay? Colorism. They keep going down the list in all of these. Now, so for example, one example, I'll give you this many examples. Oh, we want the girl to be a doctor or a dentist or something. But we don't want her to work. Okay, you don't want her to work, okay, fine, sure. So you want her to have all these educations, great. So then she gets married to the guy, and the guy is a doctor, she's a doctor, they get married, and the guy says, look, I want you to stay at home, I'm going to do all the work, and you have to look after the kids. Okay. And she thinks to herself, I have a, you know, you have a $100,000, well, nowadays $250,000 loan, I have a $250,000 loan, who's going to pay my loan? And you don't want me to work? Fast forward 5-10 years, God forbid a divorce happens, and it happens. She said, I have not worked and I have not had that experience and I'm suffering now because of this. So we need to be very clear about what is the paradigm in terms of what is the basis of marriage. And the basis of marriage in Islam is taqwa. Now we sometimes think taqwa means being a failure. That's not the truth. The taqwa is supposed to be, if you have taqwa as a man, you should work hard. You should earn. You should make sure that you are helping your family and others. As far as what we are told, Dawood alayhi salam was someone who's living off the public treasury. And Allah said, Dawood, I love the one who works for their income. And he cried for 40 days until Allah showed him how to make iron, mold iron. Ya mulayyin al-hadid li Dawood, as you know. So Allah taught him how to do that. So Allah does not like that someone just get charity or funding without the effort. Effort is very important in Islam. And so the Ahlul Bayt always did this. And I'll get to this in the other lectures. But coming back to this, when it comes to this, what is our criteria? You know, in Europe, the average wedding, inflation's hitting now, but last I checked the data, is about 6,000 euros. Maybe 7,000 now. In America, the average wedding is about $30,000 to $35,000. But in America, the big hotels have actually created something called Asian wedding coordinators. Why? Because they realize that the Asian community, Indo-Pak and the likes, and Iranian definitely, they ended up spending about $100,000 plus on one night, on one wedding. And so this is a big budget. these types of pressures, our ulama and our scholars say this is not what Islam is. Islam does not say that you have to get $1 million in the bank before you get married. That's not Islam's vision. And oftentimes, if you don't believe me on this, there was a study that was conducted at Emory University in Georgia in America that looked at the cost of a wedding ring and the divorce rate. And they found that the more expensive the ring, the more likely the divorce. Meaning if the ring was $10,000 or more, it had a 1.6% chance of divorce, meaning 160% increase in divorce. And the ones that had the lowest rate of divorce was the cheapest ring, under $1,000. Why? Because the wedding was not based in the scenario where it's based on money. That's not the right foundation. Because if the recession of 2007, 2009 taught you anything, if society taught you anything, money goes up and money goes down. It goes very fast. It can go up very fast, it can go down very fast. And so that should not be the foundation of the marriage. Yes, you should strive to excellence. You should strive to provide. But that's something that comes with the struggle and using your mind and your body to try to earn. But when this happens, we make up problems in our community. In America, we have this saying, I don't know if you have here. Have you heard of keeping up with the Joneses? Keeping up with the Joneses is my neighbor got a Mercedes, I have to get a Mercedes. My neighbor fixed their kitchen, renovated, I have to renovate it. Everyone is getting better, they're getting something nice, I have to copy it. Now I don't know why, but that's what they're doing. In the Indian community, they call it keeping up with the Patels, for example. The whole idea is everyone, you don't know why you're doing it because someone else is doing it. You see, this will never lead you to happiness. This will cause you to constantly be thinking, oh, this person has that. And when you start looking at what other people have, you don't value what Allah has already given you. And you're not grateful for it. You end up being neglectful and heedless of the gifts Allah has already given you. First principle. Second principle. Dr. John Gottman at the University of, he's actually in Seattle, and he has his own institution now. So he basically wanted to look at, in terms of marriages, and this may help some people, what are those things? He can predict with about 95% accuracy if a marriage will work or not, according to his research that he's gathered. And he said, I look for 4 things, and these are called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. That is, if these are in the relationship is not looking good. No. He said, number 1 is criticism. You start criticizing everything. Remember I mentioned last night, we often criticize people, but we don't appreciate them. Appreciation goes a long way in terms of helping the person become the better version of themselves. Number 1. By the way, this applies to children too. You know what modern psychologists say? If you want your child to be successful, you don't tell them, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're doing this wrong. You tell them, you give them an image of how you see them, and you say, is this how a future doctor behaves? Is this how a future lawyer behaves? Is this how a future alim behaves? Is this how a future intellectual, academic, you fill in the blank of whatever you want them to be, behaves? And they begin to think, hold on, I'm not behaving like that. I need to start behaving like that. And so you aspire and you help them understand how much potential they have. But believe me, when you criticize, it doesn't work. The data is very clear on that. Similarly, in a relationship, criticism doesn't help. So unless it's constructive, but the way you say constructive criticism really matters. Number 1, criticism. Number 2, he said, is defensiveness. Defensiveness is when you start giving a reason for everything that you did. The person's saying that they have this problem with you, and you start giving a reason for every single, this is why I did it. Now you may be right, but the other person hears it as, I'm right, you're wrong. That's how they hear it. It doesn't help. As Benjamin Franklin once said, the same guy who was on the $100 bill in America, he said, never ruin an apology with an excuse. Meaning, the excuse may be valid, but people don't want to hear that. The apology has its own weight. Number 3, stonewalling. This is a big one. Stonewalling is when you say, I'll try and Gadia, bas Gadia. We're not going to discuss it. What I said goes. Husband or wife, by the way. We're not going to discuss it. This is called stonewalling. That means we're not going to discuss it. I put my foot down. That's all that's happening. Period. Not healthy. Final thing is is contempt. And he says contempt is the worst. Contempt is when you look at your spouse from a platform, higher platform, down. So you're looking down at them in terms of, I'm better than you. And that's really a disaster. So what are some of the solutions? Some of the solutions are kindness and generosity. You know, there's a study conducted at Arizona State University that said, look, they asked people, husband and wife, how many of you appreciate the work that and the help and the task that your spouse does? Husband and wife, for example, if they cook, they clean, if they work in the office, if they make money, whatever they do, how many of you appreciate what they do? And everyone said, of course we appreciate that. Then they asked the second question, how many of you actually tell your spouse you appreciate them? And no one told them. Jibrail's going to tell them? Who's going to tell them? The idea is, we need to make sure that we communicate to the other person that we appreciate them and what they're doing in their lives. You want the solution to a happy marriage? There's something called the honeymoon effect. You heard of the honeymoon effect? Two people get married, the first, 6 to 9, hopefully inshallah years are all positive, maybe even more than that. Some brothers are thinking 6 to 9 days. But the reality is, hopefully it's much longer than that. And so this applies, this happens not only in marriages, this also happens in jobs. Google has some of the best talent in the world, in Silicon Valley in America, for example, right? Google has found even their employees, who they give them everything, they give them packages, stock options, free haircuts, free money, free meals, free, you name it. Even there, after 6 to 9 months, they notice productivity drops. So they did a lot of research to figure out how do you keep people productive in their jobs after the honeymoon period. And they found one thing, which didn't cost anything. The one thing was, when leadership asked people to list out 3 things at the beginning of the day that they were grateful for about this job or this position. So why are you grateful? Maybe this job gives me the ability to help my family, give my children a good school, whatever it is. The same thing applies for your relationship. Begin the day by writing down 3 things that you are grateful for in the relationship with your husband and wife. And say, Shukran lillah, Shukran lillah, Shukran lillah for each one of those things, but truly be grateful for it. And don't say that I don't have anything to be grateful. Find something. I say this because the future of our generations depends on it. And it's very vital for us to take this seriously. The basis of the relationship should be something healthy and something that helps the future generation. Otherwise, we'll be shot dead in the water. And then who suffers? You and I suffer. Juwaybir was a companion of Rasulullah, and he was someone who didn't have a tribe and who didn't have prestige in society. But Islam tried to make sure everyone had their rights looked after. So what happened was, he wasn't getting married, and people used to say, Juwaybir, why don't you get married? And unfortunately, sometimes people pick on these things, and even some companions used to make fun of him and say, Juwaybir, get married. And eventually, they were making fun of him because they knew that the culture, unfortunately, the Jahiliyyah was still there amongst some people. And so people wouldn't let him get married. So Rasulullah said, Juwaybir, why don't you get married? Now Rasulullah, when he said this, he's saying it for a real reason and productivity. So Juwaybir says, Ya Rasulullah, you know that people here are Muhajirin or Ansar. And the Ansar, by the way, some of the Ansar had superiority complexes. Us as Insan, we find some way to think we're superior than others. I don't know, it's very strange. And every culture, every society, even sometimes when people are on the same street, they say, I'm on this side of the street, you're on the other side of the street. We find some strange, illogical thing. Anyways, so when it came to this, he said, Ya Rasulullah, everyone here in Medina now is Ansar, who's going to marry them? Ansar only marry Ansar. Rasulullah said, okay, I want you to go to Zayd and go ask him and tell him that I sent the message for you to marry his daughter. At that point in time, he said, Ya Rasulullah, me marry Zayd? He's an Ansar. An Ansari, his daughter? Ya Rasulullah, the Rasul said, yeah, I'm saying, go, tell him, give my message that I said this. So Zayd's thinking to himself, Rasulullah is saying it, but who on earth is going to do that? So, sometimes you have a defeatist mentality. Sometimes you get broken-hearted, or you get hit so many times, you can't think positive anymore. It's very important to think positive in the darkest times. You have to train yourself. There's a book called Learned Optimism by Dr. Seligman, who I mentioned yesterday. Read that book, it's highly recommended. Anyways, when he comes to this, he says, okay, I'll go. What can I lose? So he goes to Zayd's house. Zayd was wealthy, Ansar, respectable person of the society, and he's sitting there with all the Ansar. And Zayd comes, Salamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. He says, I've come with a message from Rasulullah. He said, do you want me to say it in public, in front of everyone, or in private? Now, Zayd was thinking to himself that, Rasulullah's message, it's a status symbol, like this is prestigious, must be good. He said, no, tell it in front of everybody. Yeah, it's Rasulullah's message from Rasulullah's honor. Tell us it in front of everyone. So Zayd saying, okay, sure. He said, Rasulullah said that I should marry your daughter. Zayd said, I wish I'd asked him in private, maybe better of you. He said, he stopped for a second, he said, we're Ansar, and Ansar only marry Ansar. So, he said, go back, Zayd. He said, I will go and, just tell Rasulullah that, we're Ansar and you're not Ansar, and it's nothing personal, but we don't do this. And so, inshallah, thank you, but alhamdulillah, no thank you. So Zayd's thinking to himself, Rasulullah, I knew it. I don't know why he told me to waste my time. He's thinking to himself. So he turns around and he leaves. When he leaves, Zayd thinks to himself, maybe Rasulullah actually said this, and maybe I should go myself to clarify what's the matter. Maybe there's some miscommunication or something like that. Rasulullah didn't know the culture. Something like this. And so he sent a messenger. He said, go intercept Zayd. Tell him, go home. You don't need to tell Rasulullah. We'll go send the message to Rasulullah directly. So he sent the messenger. Messenger said, Zayd, you can go home. We're going to contact Rasulullah directly and tell him this is the case. So Zayd said, okay. At that point in time, Zayd himself got up and he went and he proceeded towards Rasulullah. When he got to Rasulullah, he said, Salamu alaikum ya Rasulullah. He said, wa alaikum assalam. Ya Rasulullah, something interesting happened today. I want to talk to you about it. Rasulullah said, yes, what happened? He said, Zayd, we're Zayd and I'm Ansari, the family. But, Juwayber came today and he was saying that you sent a message that he should marry my daughter. Is that right? So yes, of course. Rasulullah said, yes, I told Juwayber, it's time, it's the age of marriage, you should go and get married to your daughter. He said, Ya Rasulullah, we're Ansar. How can Ansar marry non-Ansar? How is that possible? Our culture, Rasul said, why? Juwayber is a good man, hardworking, taqwa. He's a Muslim, he has iman. Ya Rasul, the culture and the environment. At that point in time, he had actually talked to his daughter also. And his daughter, by the way, is the one who encouraged him to go to Rasulullah directly. And his daughter said, Ya, my father, what if Rasulullah actually said this and you are not taking it seriously? Then he went. So, subhanAllah, sometimes we think the parents are always right. Parents are many times right, not always. Sometimes the children are right. There were people who became Muslim in the early days, but their parents were against them becoming Muslim. Sometimes it happens. So when you deal with your children, you should not say, I'm right, you're wrong. What I say goes. Because everyone in humanity wants two things fundamentally: love and respect. And the same way you want love and respect, the child also wants love and respect. And when you disrespect the child, their ego gets burned. The same way your ego would get burned if they didn't listen to you. And why I say that is, remember this gift that I'm giving you right now. You've heard of the golden rule that's in every religion? And that is, treat others the way you want to be treated. You heard this? I want you to trade the golden rule for platinum rule. You have minerals here in Australia, right? Gold, platinum. Platinum's pretty expensive too, right? So trade it. What do I mean trade? Golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. Platinum rule, treat others the way they want to be treated. There's a difference. Meaning what? I'm very talkative and extroverted. My spouse is very quiet. And I want to talk to people in a huge crowd, for example, and I tell her, you do the same thing. It won't work. It's not her interest. Similarly, you have to know things. These are two things, and hopefully our sisters are listening also, and the brothers. I've dealt with this and it's helped a lot of people. If you read the Bible and the Quran and the teachings of Rasulullah, you will find a principle there. And that is this. And there's a book I recommend you read. It's called Love and Respect. In Ephesians 5:31, you will find in the Bible it says, a man should love his wife the way he loves himself. And a woman, a wife, should respect her husband. Now remember this. Husband and wife both need love and respect. Again, both need love and respect. But what is primary for each is different. Women often need love first. Men often need respect first. So we think that because we want respect, the wife wants respect, and so we think the way we want to be treated, that's how they want to be treated. Now both need respect, both need love. But what is primary is different. That's also when the Quran says qanitat is maybe one of the meanings that scholars give is a devotional respect. Now Rasulullah says in his hadith, a man who says I love you to his wife will find that that statement will not leave her heart. This is not Hollywood or Bollywood or something like this. This is Rasulullah saying this. So there's a wisdom there. The Ahlul Bayt were saying show love, show affection. Because children, remember, children hear with their eyes. What do I mean? You can say whatever you want, but what they see, they know is reality. Ainul yaqeen and haqqul yaqeen. Remember, for those who are in the house Majlis, I apologize, but I'm explaining this. Montesquieu, the French philosopher, said you have three teachers in life. The first teacher is your parents. They're the first danishgah, they're the first university, they're the first people to teach you. Number one. Number two is your schoolmaster at the school. They're the second teacher. And the third teacher is the world. And when you get to the world, you realize that everything that the first two teachers said was wrong. Because the first two teachers, the parents in the school, told you how things should be. And the world tells you how things are. And there's a difference between how things actually are and how they should be. You know, I have to deal with this. Young people come to me and they say, Sayyid, I did everything right my whole life. For example, I made sure that I prayed on time, I fasted on time, I got a good education, I got a good degree, I got everything right, and then it came time for me to get married. And when it came time for me to get married, you know, I was trying to find a spouse. And I'm in this line, this metaphorical line to get married, and mashallah, this guy comes along who's never been to masjid, never been to Husainiyah, never been to Imam Barakah, sometimes doesn't have a degree, but he's a millionaire. Maybe because his father's a millionaire. And he gets married before everyone else. And then the young person realizes what we say and what we do are two different things. There is tadad between qawl and fi'l. We say one thing, we do another. One of the biggest challenges that we have globally in our communities is outside. And this is in me talking to the young generation. They say, outside it says Imam Hussein Center, outside it says Imam Ali Center, outside it says Imam Zamana Center. Well, but when I come inside, it's all Muawiyah politics. It's all Banu Umayyah politics inside. Outside it looks very nice. And the name is there. And when people realize and see this, they say, I can use my time in a better way. You want to know the future of our community, look at our ability to work together as communities. If we're not able to work together at communities level, the young people see right through that. What's the value add of the community? They'll say, all I see is these people fighting, all I see is them bickering, can't get along, akhlaq is zero. Not that it is that, but many times that's what they perceive. And as the saying goes, perception is reality. So how we adopt akhlaq in our houses and our communities and every aspect matters, because young people are watching and that's how they listen. People will not do what you say, they will do as you do. You start smoking a cigarette and tell your son don't smoke. Will they listen? The reality of the matter is, there needs to be alignment on this. There's much to say, I'll leave it inshallah, but what I mean is, if we want our communities to flourish, we need to be very honest about these things. The double standards need to go away. Otherwise, people will say, we say one thing, we do another. And that's really where it hurts. Relationships should be based on love and affection and communication. We need to teach people how to communicate. How do you tell someone how you feel? How do you discuss things? Negotiation. I was reading a book called Getting to Yes. I recommend you read it. And one of the things that they were mentioning was the professor, the author of the book, he said that he came home one day after teaching his class at the university, and he came home, and now he's a negotiation specialist. His expertise is negotiations. So he got home, and I feel like all parents should learn this. He said he got home, and there was an argument going on between his son and his wife. And so he said, what's going on? The son said, Mom, my mother is saying that I have to go to sleep at 7 p.m. And I want to go to sleep at 8. And in the evening, he said, and he asked his wife, is this true? He said, yeah. He said, I'm saying 7, he's saying 8, and we've been fighting this whole time. And he says, look, let me take care of this, let me give you a break. So he sits down with his son, and he says, can you repeat to me what's the issue? He says, I want to go to sleep at 8 later, and my mom, she wants me to sleep at 7 earlier. And we're not agreeing. Mom said 100% 7, and he said 100% 8. So the professor and the author of the book, he says, okay, you want to sleep at 8, she wants you to sleep at 7. How about this? How about you go to sleep at 7:01? Said done. Son said done. I'll do it right away. And then he got up and went to sleep. The idea was, sometimes we think all or nothing, binary thinking, 0 or 1. But the same way that you would want, that young man or that young son, he thought he won, and he believed he won because he was willing to deal with him, and he was willing to work with him. Similarly, on the other side, would we want to be treated that way? If you're in a negotiation, be honest. Would you want that someone gets 100% of their way the other side? You would want that someone keeps your heart a little bit too. So why would we not want that for our children? And that's the dynamic of the akhlaq that Ahlul Bayt had already told us. Look at how Ahlul Bayt spoke to each other. Their akhlaq was immaculate, it was pristine, it was the best. Father, son, mother, daughter, siblings, it was well ahead. And this is what is needed in order for the quality of our relationships to increase and get better. And inshallah it will. But it requires work, it requires effort. Sometimes we don't know their things. Sometimes someone's feeling, mental health is a big challenge as well on both sides. The pressure that people are feeling. Compassion is needed. That's where the community comes in to help people interact in light of Ali Muhammad. I'm leaving everything, but remember, it is the likes of Rasulullah and Bibi Khadija and their marriage that gives rise to the likes of Fatima al-Zahra. It is the relationship of Ali and Fatima that gives rise to Hassan, Hussein, Zainab, and these great personalities. It is the likes of the relationship of Zainab and Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar that give rise to these children such as Awn al-Muhammad. The likes of Farwa and Imam Hassan, who gave rise to the likes of Al-Qasim ibn al-Hassan. These beautiful, strong relationships give rise to these elements and these elements of vision. But even further than that, you will find an alignment in terms of the relationship between the Ansar of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and their spouses. Habib ibn Malahir. Habib ibn Malahir was a companion of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam who was still in Kufa. And everyone had tried to make the movement towards Karbala, but there was a big type of curfew and a besiegement of Kufa. That is, Kufa had been surrounded, muhasara. They had done a circle around it, and so nobody could get out. Even the Shia that wanted to go there. This is so important for us to consider. The poet says a beautiful line here, that sometimes people say, oh, the Shia of Imam Hussein, the Shia of Kufa, they betrayed Imam Hussein, that's why they died. That's why Imam Hussein was killed. What's the answer? A poet says very beautifully that इसीलिए तो हिरासा में सिर्फ कूफा था, हिजाज में ये जरूरत नहीं पड़ी होगी. Meaning what? In Hijaz, in Makkah and Medina, Imam Hussein had to leave Makkah and Medina and no one was supporting Imam Hussein. That is, they had been bought out already, the people. But Kufa, the enemy knew that Imam Hussein had supporters, but they used every tactic to try to use fear and all of these elements to stop them. So Habib ibn Madahir is there. Imam Hussein is in Karbala. Bibi Zainab says to Imam Hussein, my brother, the army on the other side is getting bigger every single day. Is there anyone to come to our aid? Anyone to come to our assistance? And at that point in time, Imam Hussein says, don't worry, my dear sister, I've written a letter. And he had written the letter and had been sent. The letter was sent towards Kufa. When it was sent towards Kufa, the narrations say that Habib ibn Madahir is at his home in Kufa and he has just sat down to eat. When he sits down to eat, there is a knock on the door. When there is a knock on the door, he asks, who is it? He says, I am the messenger. I'm the Qasim of Hussein. I'm the messenger of Hussein. Habib heard that his master of Hussein, his messenger, he ran to the door. He opened it. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. He said, where's the letter? He gives him the letter. Habib, he kisses it. He smells it. He hugs it. From his master, Sayyid al-Shuhada. He opens it. It says, إِلَىٰ رَجُلٍ فَقِيهٍ Habib ibn Madahir. Towards an intellectual, educated, faqih, jurist, Habib ibn Madahir. Imagine the Imam saying this to someone. He says, Habib, I'm in a difficult position. I'm surrounded. If you can come help, please help. May Allah never show anyone the day. Habib begins to cry and he folds up the letter. When he folds up the letter, the narrations say that he now is dealing with his wife. His wife is there and she doesn't know what's going on. He's read it to himself, the letter. And at that point in time, when he reads this letter, at that point in time, his wife says, Oh Habib, what is the matter? Oh Habib, why is it that you have not said anything? What does the letter say? Now Habib is in a situation where he's thinking, shall I tell her that Rasulullah's grandson, Imam al-Hussein, has called me and asked me for assistance? What will she say? Will she say no? Will she say yes? I don't know. At that point in time, he says, not the details of the letter, but he says it's a letter from Imam Hussein. He sent me a letter. She said, what does the letter say? At that point in time, he says that he is calling on me for help. He's calling on me for assistance. He says, I've been surrounded, Habib. Your friend Hussein has been surrounded. If you can, come to my assistance. But he didn't say what he intends to do. What is his niyyah? What's his plan? She says, the wife says, that what is your plan? What is your intent? What is your niyyah? Look at the alignment of the lovers of Ahlul Bayt, the companions of Imam al-Hussein. Habib, to test his wife, to check, to see what her view is. He says, I'm thinking about it. I'm considering it. I'm contemplating it. At that point in time, Allahu Akbar, the wife of Habib, she says, you are contemplating it? The son of Fatima the Zahra is calling you? You're contemplating it? You're considering it? You're thinking about it? Give me your sword. Give me your shield. I will go to the battlefield and protect Sayyid al-Shuhada. I will protect Hussein. I will protect the son of Fatima the Zahra. Habib ibn Madahir began to cry. He thought to himself, he said, my Mawla, my master, Imam Hussein, what level of maghlumiyat has overcome you that the women are willing to sacrifice their life for you? Ajrukum ala Allah, ajrukum ala Allah. Azadaro कहते हैं कि Habib ibn Madahir نے ارادہ کیا اور پھر کربلا کی جانب آگے بڑھنے لگے، مگر کوفہ حراسہ میں تھا، اور پھر انہوں نے کہا کہ رات کے وقت جانا پڑے گا اور تیاری کرنی پڑے گی۔ اور جب حبیب بن مظاہر اپنے گھر سے نکلے، انہوں نے اپنے غلام سے کہا تھا کہ شہر کے دروازے کے پاس رہنا میرے گھوڑے کے ساتھ، میں آؤں گا، جب میں آؤں گا رات کے وقت یا اس مقرر وقت پر تو پھر میں گھوڑے پہ سوار ہو کے حسین کی جانب چلا جاؤں گا جب کوئی نہ دیکھ رہا ہوگا، تاکہ میں کوفے سے یہاں سے روانہ ہو جاؤں۔ کہتے ہیں کہ حبیب کو آنے میں تھوڑی سی تاخیر ہو گئی تھی، دیر ہو گئی تھی، اور جب حبیب آخر پہنچے گھوڑے کے پاس اور غلام کے پاس، انہوں نے کچھ دیکھا، کچھ سنا، اور کیا سنا کہ گھوڑے سے وہ غلام جو حبیب کا غلام تھا وہ کچھ کہہ رہا تھا۔ کیا کہہ رہا تھا؟ کہہ رہا تھا، اے گھوڑے، لگ رہا ہے کہ حبیب نہیں آ رہے، اگر نہیں آئے تو میں خود سوار ہو کے کربلا چلو جاؤں گا اور امام حسین کی نصرت کروں گا، وہ مظلوم ہے۔ امام حسین کا نام جو سنا اور جو یہ بیان سنا، حبیب گریہ کرنے لگے، کہا ہے میرے مولا کس قدر مظلومیت ہے کہ غلام آپ پر فدا ہونے کے لیے تیار ہیں۔ یہ کون سا وقت آیا فاطمہ الزہرا کی اولاد پر؟ اجرکم علی اللہ۔ حبیب آگے بڑھے اور کوفے سے روانہ ہوئے، اور جب کوفے سے روانہ ہوئے تو کربلا کی جانب بڑھے۔ جب کربلا کے پاس آ رہے تھے اور آگے بڑھ رہے تھے اور نزدیک تر ہوتے جا رہے تھے، دور سے وہاں پر گرد و غبار نظر آ رہی تھی، گرد و غبار گھوڑے کی ٹانپوں کی۔ دور سے انہوں نے دیکھا خیام امام حسین سے، جب انہوں نے دیکھا امام حسین نے کہا، اے علی اکبر، اے عباس، میرا بچپن کا دوست آ رہا ہے، اس کا استقبال کرو، اس کو جا کے لے آؤ۔ یہ گئے، جب گئے حبیب سے ملے، جب ملے تو واپس آئے، امام حسین کے پاس آئے، سلام کیا، امام نے دعائیں دی، گلے ملے۔ کہتے ہیں کہ تکبیرات بلند ہوئی، ایک مرحلے کے لیے کچھ خوشی شاید تھی کہ کوئی پرانا دوست آیا ہے۔ یہ خیام میں جہاں پر مشکلات ہی مشکلات تھی، تکبیرات بلند ہوئے۔ زینب اولیاء مقام خیام میں تھی، کہا فضا یہ کون سی آواز ہے، تکبیرات کیوں بلند ہو رہے ہیں، ذرا پتہ کیجیے۔ جب کہتے ہیں فضا نے پتہ کیا، واپس آئی، کہا شہزادی زینب، حسین کے بچپن کا دوست حبیب بن مظاہر آیا ہے، جبھی تو تکبیرات بلند ہو رہی ہیں۔ زینب نے کہا کہ اے فضا میرا سلام پہنچا دو حبیب تک۔ بی بی فضا واپس گئی، کہا اے حبیب، علی کی بیٹی زینب نے تجھے سلام کہا ہے۔ حبیب نے امامہ زمین پہ پھینکا، ماتم کیا، کہ یہ کون سی قیامت ہو گئی، علی کی بیٹی اس غلام کو سلام کرے۔ اجرکم علی اللہ۔ خدا کسی غیرت مند کو یہ منظر نہ دکھائے۔ آل محمد نے کیسا سنا ہوگا، عباس نے کیسا سنا ہوگا، حسین نے کیسا سنا ہوگا۔ یہ وہی آل محمد ہیں جو رسول اللہ نے خود کہا کہ نہیں چاہتا، قرآن نے کہا کوئی اجر رسالت مگر ان سے قرابت، جو قرابت ان سے ہے، ان سے محبت، بعد اجرکم علی اللہ میں نے ختم کیا. یہ وہی مقام ہے کہ سب نے یہ فیصلہ کیا اور حبیب آئے. یہ وہ رات ہے جو انصار حسینی ہم یاد کر رہے ہیں. میں نے ختم کیا مگر ایک بات میں عرض کرنا چاہتا ہوں کہ جس کا ذکر کم ہوتا ہے اور یہ ایک شہید ہیں کہ امام حسین کے ساتھ ہر قسم کے لوگ تھے. اور ایک میں یہی بتانا چاہتا ہوں کہ حبیب اور ان کی زوجہ میں ایک ہی نظر تھی. اسی طریقے سے وہب قلبی اور ان کی زوجہ وہب وہ تھا جو کرسچن فیملی سے آتا تھا مگر اس نے اپنی والدہ کے ساتھ امام حسین اور اپنی زوجہ کے ساتھ جس کی ابھی ابھی شادی ان کی ہوئی تھی وہ امام حسین سے راستے میں ملے. وہب نے کہا, مختصر کر رہا ہوں, وہب نے کہا کہ میرا دل گواہی دیتا ہے کہ یہ شخص حسین ابن علی یہ سچ پہ ہے, یہ حق پہ ہے. تو پھر ارادہ کیا ہے؟ بیوی نے پوچھا, ماں نے پوچھا. میرا ارادہ یہ ہے کہ میں ان کے ساتھ جنگ لڑوں گا اور میں ان کے ساتھ شریک ہوں گا اور میں حق پہ جان دوں گا. دونوں نے کہا ٹھیک ہے. آخر مگر جب یہ ہو چکا, جب یہ وقت آیا تو جو نئی نئی شادی ہوئی تھی ابھی ان دونوں کی, وہب ان کی زوجہ کی, امام حسین سے گفتگو ہو رہی ہے. وہب نے کہا میں اپنی زندگی دے رہا ہوں آپ کی راہ میں, خدا کی راہ میں, حق کی راہ میں. پھر امام نے یہ وہب کی بیوی سے گزارش کی اور بات کی, اور جب بات کی انہوں نے کہا کہ فرزند بطول امام حسین ایک گزارش ہے آپ سے, وہ یہ کہ ہماری شادی ابھی ابھی ہوئی ہے, یہ وہب جائیں گے, یہ مقتل میں قتل ہو جائیں گے. میں بس ایک درخواست کرتی ہوں اور وہ یہ ہے کہ آپ نے ضمانت دی کہ یہ وہب جنت میں جائے گا. ابھی ابھی ہماری شادی ہوئی ہے, بس اتنی درخواست ہے فرزند زہرا کہ یہ جو میرا شوہر ہے, یہ میرا وہب جو ہے, یہ جنت میں اس وقت تک نہ جائے جب تک میں ساتھ نہ ہوں, کیونکہ اس دنیا میں ہمیں وقت ساتھ نہ ملا. امام نے کہا میں ضمانت لیتا ہوں, عاشور کا روز آیا, وہب گئے, گمسان کی جنگ لڑی, اشقیہ نے شہید کیا, اور جب شہید کیا اسی وقت وہب کی بیوی لاش وہب پہ آئی. کہے وہب تو کہاں گیا, تو شہید ہو گیا. اسی وقت ظالموں نے نیزہ مارا وہب کی بیوی پر, شہید ہو گئی بیوی. امام حسین لاشوں کو دیکھ کے رونے لگے. صلی اللہ علیہ یا رسول اللہ, صلی اللہ علیہ یا امیر المؤمنین, صلی اللہ علیہ یا فاطمہ الزہرا سیدۃ النساء العالمین, صلی اللہ علیہ یا حسن المصطفیٰ. السلام علی الحسین وعلی علی الحسین وعلی اولاد الحسین وعلى أصحاب الحسين. معكم الحسين, يا حسين يا حسين.